Welcome to the Iferia Techcast, where we bring you all things science, engineering, technology, and innovation. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today we are joined by John Mason, a sales leader who somehow ended up building technical infrastructure that challenges how companies think about data and compliance. His work replaces what he calls compliance theater with systems that actually prove controls are working, not just documented. With a background in music and over a decade in sales leadership, he brings an unusual mix of timing, listening, and technical thinking to problems most people don't even know exist. So, John, I am on the next side there to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Ezekiel. Glad to be here.
All right. Let's get things started, John. It's an honor to have you here. Your current work is deeply technical. You're building federated data infrastructure for compliance and operational intelligence. So how does a sales leader end up in the middle of building something like that?
Yeah, so the work I do as a CRO at Zequal is purely just through networking. So strangely enough, I have a lodger who rents a room out for me, and he heard me doing my work in SaaS tech sales whilst working from home, and thought, you know what, John, you'd really get on well with my friend Adam. Let me introduce you. So I met Adam, and then we just clicked, and it's a bit of a unusual story. Towards the end of 2025, I was looking to leave my current role, and Adam was being made redundant. So with a few other founders, we formed ZQL, which is aiming to federate data and to find the source, the true source of an answer when putting questions through compliance.
You're currently working on a project that replaces compliance data with provable control effectiveness, surfacing the gap between what documentation says and what's actually enforced. So for the engineers and compliance folks in my audience, what does that actually solve?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest ways for me to explain it would be to give an example of a company that, sells their own SaaS product, let's just say, something that hopefully resonates with your audience. You may have a marketing automation tool such as HubSpot. You may have a CRM such as Salesforce. You may have a billing software such as Zero Accounting. You may have your own SaaS platform. All four of those computers will hold pieces of data on your client, maybe their name, their email address, etc. But there's not one single source of truth. And more often than not, the go-to tends to be to pull all of that data into a single data lake. And that doesn't work in real time, because if you pull it all in a data lake in real time, you lose the nuance of the data. So SQL sits within the layers. And actually, when you put the question to the platform saying, how many times has John logged into the software, it can go and find that answer, as opposed to using AI to string it together and potentially make an assumption or a guess. It uses data federation to actually find out where the gaps are.
And so, John, you talk about ZQL, that's a zoned query language, that enables global questions with locally interpreted answers. So without the central data warehouse, that's quite a big architectural claim. So how do you sell something that's technical to organizations that are used to a single source of truth approach?
Yeah, the single source of truth approach is key. That's what we're all searching for. But the gap, the delta, is different between what the systems are saying is happening and what actually is happening in the systems. So like I said, you could have 1, 2, 3, 4 bits of text saying different things. And how do you survive a compliance audit? How do you prove that you are compliant? And this is something that spans across industry. It could be AI compliance. It could be financial regulation compliance. It could be data compliance, GDPR, DORA, SOC. I just keep talking and naming these things over and over again. So the idea is, instead of using AI to interpretate the data and to ask questions of the systems, ZQL uses deterministic views to find out the exact answers, to identify the gap, the delta, and then to present that information back to you so you can take the appropriate actions to reconcile the gap and then create a single source of truth.
Okay, that's insightful. You also help, new sales leaders go from accidental managers to people who know what to do on Monday. So, you were promoted based on your selling skills and, people skills, not a desire to manage. So, what's the hardest part of that transition? What no one tells you about becoming a leader?
Yeah, I think a simple analogy is to compare leadership in a similar vein to making a family and having children. When you are single, it is me, myself, and I. When you are an AE, account executive, or an SDR, sales development representative, it is yourself. You are responsible as an individual contributor for your target. When you become a team leader, you're responsible for other people. You are now commercially incentivized upon their success. You are now in charge of their growth and their development. Similar to children, you've gone from having yourself to look after to now being in charge of other human beings.
All right. You believe that the best managers aren't the alpha or the people pleaser. They are the ones empowered to lead with intention. So for an engineer or team lead in our audience who's been thrust into management, how do they find that intention? Where do they start?
Yeah, so the concept of an accidental manager, it's something that's spoken about across the whole of human resources. It's not just a sales thing. It happens in the NHS, it happens in engineering, in IT, McDonald's. It happens everywhere. And what tends to happen is people that are good at the job then get told to become the leader and then teach other people to be good at the job. But it just creates an echo chamber, of not necessarily having the support that's required to deliver the outcomes that the business wants. So when people are promoted to manager based on the merit and the success of their job, that can cause toxic managers because those people may be lone wolf alphas. They could be the high achiever performer of low trust, person that's out for themselves. And we have a million different ways of measuring those people. But what we want the people that might be necessarily the low or medium achievers with high trust, because trust isn't something you can teach, performance is. So you want the people with the core skills and values, whether it's in engineering, IT, hospitality, sales, whatever it may be. People that you can turn into good leaders are the ones that have the core foundations of being good within inside them, and then you can teach them how to lead well.
Okay, so John, you have been in sales leadership for over a decade now, and you are consulting on federated data infrastructure. So, how does selling something as abstract as querying reality instead of documentation, how does it differ from selling traditional B2B products? What's the mindset shift?
Yeah, I think the mindset shift is, it's probably not as wildly different as people think. We're looking at trying to understand what someone's pain is and what the outcomes are they're trying to deliver, which is the same if you're selling B2B. You're looking for that pain and the outcomes that you're trying to deliver. If I go in and I try and sell on features and benefits, I'm not going to get hugely far. If I can identify a problem that they're trying to solve, maybe it's an unrealized problem, an unrealized risk, and I'm able to explain to them that they are quite far apart. The gap is quite wide from where they are to where they should be. If I'm able to tell them that I can narrow that gap and bring them a lot closer, and it's not going to be difficult to implement or adopt, that is what someone, whether it's a CISO or a chief risk officer, is looking for, to be able to solve the big company problems. Because if you think about leadership, and especially if you're in charge of departments and compliance, they're not firefighters. They're more like they look after forest. They're a forest ranger. Yeah. So sometimes you got to let the fire burn and just let it reduce itself to ambers. And other times you got to make sure that you preventively stop the big fires or put out those big fires. So identifying that, what is the big pain problem? What is the thing that keeps the business up at night? Not the nice to have, the essential. And that, I think, is where the mind shift change happens.
All right, John. So for a founder right now, or maybe an engineer building in regulated spaces. So what's the one thing you think they need to understand about compliance that they are probably ignoring until it's too late?
I think that's a great question. I think this applies across engineering compliance, IT compliance, across financial regulation, etc., and things like that. I believe a lot of people assume it's not a problem unless you get caught. But the problem is, you may see one of your partners, competitors, others in the industry be caught out by the regulator. That's when you should start paying attention. Like, what happens if they ask us to document our processes and to see if we are compliant? So I think it comes down to fighting those fires and choosing the battles to attack head on. But with ZQL, if we're able to do something that should take you 6 days and reduce it down to 1 day, that's where we can help alleviate that pain when it comes to being able to document where you're compliant in the areas in which you are being assessed based on the highly regulated industry you work in.
All right. So, John, you've been a top performer, beating targets consistently, and you've also coached others to do the same. So, what's the most common mistake you see smart and driven people make when they are trying to hit a number? What's the thing that actually holds them back?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Ezekiel. I think chasing the metric rather than the outcome is probably the biggest thing. So if I was to, it's an example I use when sort of talking, and it's slightly UK centric, but hopefully it will resonate with the audience. So in the UK, we have the NHS, the National Health Service. If they have a task of trying to reduce the A&E waiting times for accident and emergency, if they focus on purely reducing that number, they are going to put things in place that don't solve the problem, but just move it elsewhere. That could be caring for patients in corridors. It could be leaving patients with the ambulance staff, the paramedics, in the ambulance until such time they're ready to be admitted so the clock doesn't start. All of a sudden, I'm happy, I've ticked my box, I've reduced that waiting time, but you haven't solved the problem. You haven't focused on the outcome, you focused on the metric. That happens in sales. If you want to make 100 calls a day, so what? Do you get paid for hitting 100 calls a day, or do you get paid for making sales? Chase the outcome, not the metric. That will apply, I'm pretty sure, to your entire audience.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, John. So you studied music and, then moved into sales and now deep tech infrastructures. Were there any lessons from playing music that you now, apply to your work, in sales and even in deep tech infrastructure today?
Yeah. So in music, for example, the ability to play an instrument while singing and performing is doing two tasks at once. If you're playing in a band environment, you are able to listen to what is going on whilst also listening to what you are doing. And that falls into that active listening. You're actively listening, which is key from a sales perspective. Music is a discipline as well. It's something that you can start and progress through. I also think there are plenty of transferable skills. If I am in a leadership role, I am performing. I'm performing now. I'm on camera to you. These are things which you can also learn when studying something like music. And I think most things that we learn day to day are things that we can take transferably into other aspects of our lives, because ultimately we are all lifetime learners. We're not finished learning just because we complete a task. We're on to the next thing. I think taking those things into a professional life is key. Confidence, arrogance, that's a thing that you need to balance in sales. And data federation, the ability to communicate at a high level with someone, match their energy, match their skill set. I just need to know as much or a little bit more than the person I'm speaking to. I do not need to be the expert.
So, for you personally, John, you're building something that challenges fundamental assumptions about data architecture. So, what's the most exciting part of this build? What exactly on it keeps you up at night?
Most exciting part is the endless possibility. Whenever we sit down, we have senior leadership meetings, we are trying to make sure that we focus on specific areas where the product can do the most good. for the industries that we look to serve. But every single day, we think of a new way we can apply this application and how we can help a new set of businesses, a new set of customers, a new set of end clients. And it just seems to be the gift that keeps on giving, and that itself is quite exciting. That just almost like not information overload, but an overwhelming amount of things that we can do with ZQL and taking this approach over using like AI and stuff to do shortcuts and just to assume the answer from within the data.
Okay, so John, you mentioned generational wealth and neurodiversity in your tags from on the platform where we connected that on Podmatch. So I'm actually curious. So how do those themes show up with you, the work, what you're doing exactly? What's the connection?
Yeah, so generational wealth. So I also work within financial services. My previous 9 to 5, my previous sort of corporate job was working for a SaaS fintech. I'm also doing some consulting for another SaaS fintech at the moment. So I'm still very much involved in financial services, which ties nicely in with ZQL because financial services is a regulated industry that ZQL can help. I am in my late 30s. I am a millennial, and there is a big understanding at the moment across the world that the generation before myself, the boomers, baby boomers, they are due to no longer be of this mortal world, and generational wealth will shift from from my parents down to my generation. And that is a key thing in financial services because technology is key. As a millennial, I grew up with computers. I use my phone daily. I bought a house in the UK using my phone. I never went to anyone's offices. Financial advisors still work a very old style of customer relationship, very much face-to-face meetings, and it would be the financial advisor meeting with the man of the house. So I believe it's really important from a generational wealth perspective for advisors to understand that men statistically pass away quicker than women. So women are due to inherit the wealth, and then they will then pass it on to the next generation. And so forming that relationship, again, sales techniques, building relationships with the wife, the husband, and the children will add longevity to their businesses. And I can support that through technology that I help build, and I can support that technology through data federation as well. So
you very much explained why you added generational wealth as your tag on Podmatch, but I am still interested in neurodiversity, which is there included in your tag. So I'm still curious. What's the connection? Why is it there?
Yes, so I am what you would call neurodivergent. So my brain isn't necessarily wired in a normal way. So at the moment, there's a big push for understanding the neurodiversity that the human brain has, whether that is, for example, attention deficit disorder, or whether it is autism, or very serious mental health conditions such as OCD or bipolar, or in my case, clinical depression. So for some reason, my brain is just not wired the same way as everyone else's. And so where I lose some attributes, I typically gain them in other areas. So, whilst I may see the world in gray rather than in color, I am able to work at a pace that is frightening to the average person. So it's about recognizing those traits and those attributes in people with neurodiversity to ensure that they are put to work in the most effective way possible. If you were to think of football, you may have shooting attributes, you may have passing attributes, stamina, running. You're going to put your big, strong, tall, muscular players at the back in defense, your rather fast, maybe slightly shorter, dribbly people on the wings, and then your strikers at the front, whether they all shapes and sizes, but ultimately they can hold the ball up and shoot. Neurodiversity is similar. So you will have, I'm good at some things and not as others. I could do these things super effective and these not so well. So putting those people in the right places is something I think will go a long way for business and for mental health across the world.
All right. So, John, part of the theme of this podcast is centered around the word innovation, and for that reason, we like to normally cycle, just cycle around that topic of innovation for every conversation we have on the show. So, for you personally, after more than a decade in sales leadership and now building technical infrastructure, what does true innovation in business development and revenue growth mean to you now?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant question. I think true innovation comes from those that are destined to survive. If you look back, there are plenty of companies around the world that have been around for over 100 years. They have survived industrial revolution, war, market crashes, but they have adapted, they have innovated, and they've continued to be relevant and continue to be strong brands and companies within their particular sectors. So I think anyone at the moment that is looking to ensure that they are innovating, it is to make sure that you stay relevant for the future, and not just get caught up in all the buzzwords and the fads. So, for example, ZQL, no one is doing what we do. That is where the innovation comes from. The current fintech provider that I'm consulting for, no one is doing what they are doing. They're trying to combine two things that haven't been done previously. My previous employer were the first to do the things that they did. So I think innovation is incredibly key. I don't see many managers out there taking their experience and teaching leaders to go from accidental manager to know what they do on a Monday. A lot of the help goes towards the reps themselves. So I felt it necessary to innovate my own business and help those that can be the next generation of innovators.
Perspective you made us see the word innovation from. So lastly, John, for our listeners who actually want to connect or maybe just follow your work, so where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I spend all of my time on LinkedIn. So you'll find me on LinkedIn, John Mason. And the what's the word I'm looking for? The unique URL part to my my LinkedIn profile is John John J Mason Mason, and then numbers 88. So yeah, feel free to connect with me. Feel free to follow with me. Ask me any questions about anything. That's the whole reason why I like doing these type of podcasts. It's to engage with audiences and to continue learning and give back.
All right. Thank you for sharing that with our listeners, John. It has been an insightful and valuable time having a conversation with you here today, and I am truly excited having you as a guest on the show, John.
No problem. More than happy. Thank you very much for having me on. Hope your audience gets something from it.